Hi, I'm Erin Barnett, and I am the costume designer for this production, and I am a third year M.F.A costume design student. So, when approaching the costume design for Bonnets, what sort of the whole design and directing team talked about was wanting to approach it through the lens of this idea of exploring, female rage and female power through that, which is what we see, with these characters throughout the production. So, in doing that, in the show, there are a few very specific time period references, but there are also all of these fun sort of punk song references as well. So, how I sort of approached the theoretical design was taking images and historical research from the different periods that we were looking at. So the sort of Salem witch trials era, the Cavalier period, and then the Victorian England sort of era as well, and then infusing those very like specific historical references with this punk edge, and finding a way to give all of these characters, agency and how they wear their costumes and these, things that were very historical, but adding, with fabrics and with accessories and stuff, um, adding in that sort of punk style. And then, another thing that we talked about was the idea of how this punk aesthetic enables people to sort of play with gender a lot, and so I wanted to, look into that as well, since that is sort of an important part of the play. Yeah, and then in sort of our overall framework of the show, we do have these sort of bonnets characters that we decided as a team we wanted to be this uniform sort of group of people that are having these meetings to look at what has happened in the past, to observe these sort of stories that we see throughout the show, and so then having them in something more uniform, and in bonnets as well, to contrast with the rest of the show, where we see the specific characters. In sort of moving towards the virtual production, we knew that we couldn't do any of like the period specific things that we had in the theoretical production, because people don't have a um, you know 19th century bodice in their closet. So we knew we kind of had to make an adjustment there. And so what we decided was we would still use the punk aesthetic that we had, because that fits in really well with the rest of the show. And instead of worrying so much about setting it in these specific time periods, we would do sort of the 90s punk modern stuff, because everybody sort of has that in their closets, or something that would work for that. So in moving towards that, I sort of created little collages to give to all the actors, and had them sort of look and see what they could find in their closets, and then if they didn't have stuff, I could supply some of that. um, but yeah, I mean, the challenge is that you have less control over what it looks like. You're kind of relying on what people have, but it is sort of fun and interesting, because it provides an opportunity to give the actors a little bit more agency in what they're wearing than it normally happens in a show. So I think that is particularly fun for this show, where it is a lot about agency and empowerment. I think that allowing actors to have that input into their costumes was fun for me. I think that something that this virtual production experience really taught me was the importance of really finding sort of the crux of your connection to the script. So what is really important for storytelling, costume wise, if you have these limitations, if you don't have the ability to, fit things on people and buy things and build things. If you don't have that, then how can you still effectively tell the story in a way that will read to the audience and support the script that you have, but is just very sort of bare bones and pared down? So for the live production, I was working with Heather Milam, who's the draper for this show, on a few builds of some bodices that really, I think, sort of combined that really fun punk aesthetic with the more historical um, research that placed us in those specific time periods. And I think that would have been really cool, a really cool way to sort of explore that part of the script. Luckily, we are still getting to build some of those for forms, and so we still have that. But I just always like seeing stuff on actors and seeing how actors move in costumes and inhabit them on a stage. I think would have been really fun. I don't know that there's a specific tool that I learned about when switching to a virtual production, but I do think that something that was, interesting and new for me was having these sort of character collages that I handed out to actors with the idea that they would, find stuff in their closets. And I think like I said, it's that idea of finding sort of the crux of the play, the crux of the character, and I think that collaboration between the actors and me as the designer, I think is something that is important, and I think often when you're in a real production that isn't virtual gets left behind because there's so much going on. So I think that the opportunity to sort of have those conversations about character throughout the process was something that I really appreciated.